Thank you very much. And I will go straight on to this topic. I must say that listening to Prof, when he was talking about New Africa needing new Africans, I said that's a continental vision that we all need. New Zimbabwe needing new Zimbabweans. And Dr. Mchena, my brother Eddie, you talked about this whole issue of what can be achieved in the nation when we get together, not just looking at government. That's powerful. I'm here to amplify that very message by talking about the village. I'm a villager of Joseph village in Mwenezi, and I've realized that long is gone the time of pointing to some individuals in government or in some entity somewhere for development. It has to start at the very low level. So I will not spend too much time in terms of defining public and private sector, but I want to point out that when you look at the public sector, you are primarily talking about government and its arms. And when you are looking at the private sector, you are looking at the entrepreneurs, the companies. But more so, I want to call it the citizen sector. Me and my neighbor as individuals, what can we do? And that's fundamental. And so I want to move on to another point which is absolutely significant. And this is about what is it, when we introduce it, what is it that can be unlocked in terms of planning? And a number of areas come up: efficiency. And I will just run these through quickly. Innovation. And I've seen great innovation happening even at village level, particularly when the public and the private sector join hands. We can unlock tremendous value. But what else? Sharing of ideas, sharing of infrastructure and things like that, resources, but also sharing of risks, so that the government is not the only one carrying the risk in terms of what is happening. But what is also fundamental, ladies and gentlemen, as we share the risks, there is something that is coming out of the aspect of the two coming together as public and private, as we had, I think your testimony was very clear, decision making. Because you have got that flexibility of the private sector, and sometimes the public sector moves quite slowly, but when you bring us together, we can achieve tremendous things by actually deciding together. So very important. But also the issue of accountability. Accountability must be driven not only at the public sector, but I'm supposed to be accountable. I'm supposed to have villagers who are accountable, because I'm tired of having go to the village and I meet my fellow villagers and they talk about, oh no, government is doing this, government is doing this. My question to them always is, what are you doing yourself? Because you are the government, you are the people. But also the whole issue of impact. When we come together, what kind of impact? Look at what we had about the BCG, for example, or even the title deeds project that is going on. The impact is absolutely tremendous. So what am I saying in a nutshell? This whole issue of planning together releases tremendous value that is unparalleled. And I think Africa needs to stop looking at other people, and we have to look at ourselves and take ourselves very seriously. This issue of why are you spending your own money? Well, because it's my home. I have to spend the money rather than actually waiting for other individuals to come and develop my own home. So I want to run through very quickly 5 issues. The state of Africa is something that gives me sleepless nights. Every day I said, God, I cannot come, grow as an individual, and go to my death while Africa remains on its state. You know, I like what Kwame Nkrumah said. Africa is one continent, one people, and one nation. And indeed it is. But we've been fragmented, and I'll come to that. So, and I also want to share with you a little bit about the state of the world's wealth. It made me angry when I looked at it. But also looking at a model which I've developed recently based on the work that I'm doing in the village. I call it the SVDDM model. And I will share a little bit about that. Then we will look at the case that I'm so passionate about, which is the Joseph Village case study. In fact, some of these products that I'm having in my hands, this is paprika, which is actually being bottled in a village, Joseph Village. I was just tired of buying paprika. In fact, what was happening is that we would sell a kg for maybe $2, and then somebody is going to value add, and then out of that kg, they would generate more than $100. And they've left $2 in the village. I said, no, we must package the paprika ourselves. And so we've got this paprika, which we are selling for $5 per 50 grams, and pushing the money back to the village trust so that the village can develop on its own. Now, I want to quickly go on to the state of Africa. You know the story, and I don't have to spend too much time. The partition of Africa, the Berlin Conference of 1885, 84, 85 to 1915. Africa is the most partitioned continent on planet Earth. And in there are the roots of our challenges. But I'm not saying this so that we go back to the roots of our challenges. I'm basically saying, if you look at this African continent, it goes without saying, it's the richest continent on planet Earth. We have been told God packaged resources in the soils of Africa. And we have got so much value that is embedded on this continent. But having said that, why is it that Africa is the continent with the least per capita GDP per individual? The poorest people are found on this continent. Why? I call it the great paradox. The great paradox. The poorest people are found on the richest land. Something is wrong. And so what is it that is wrong? Of course, we can look at the 500 years history of exploitation. But it's primarily because Africa is the most partitioned continent of all the continents. And we can sit here and cry about the past. It will not help us. What we need to do is to shake ourselves and say, so what are we going to do about this unbearable past which we have? Now, if you look at the world wealth of distribution wealth, the world currently today sits with over $500 trillion. And guess what is Africa's share? It's invisible on that chart because Africa's share is 0.5%. And I went and dug some statistics, and I looked at a company like Apple, and we enjoy Apple machines. Apple today, if you Google, their market capitalization is 3.3 trillion. Guess what is the value of African wealth put together? 3.1 trillion. Surpassed by one company in the United States. And yet this is the richest continent on planet Earth. Something is wrong. If I had the opportunity, I would get together all the African heads of state into one room and say, guys, we need to appoint one president so that I can drive from Cape to Cairo with no hindrance, and I can trade, and I can actually join all the networks in Africa, have one African network, and go to the world, whether it is the United Nations, speak with one African voice. But we heard what Dr. Mboweni said. We are asked to bring up delegates, and we appoint 5 when we were supposed to bring 1 that we can support together. Unless Africans, as Africans, we take ourselves seriously, no one will. They will continue to exploit us. And so you look at that wealth chart. 50% of the world's wealth is taken up by China and the United States. So is it not a surprise now that there is this geopolitical jostling where the two are flexing their muscles? Why? Because China is going into Africa big time. The United States is saying, hang on a minute, our pie is being eaten. And so then they now fight their geopolitical wars. Where is our role? Our role should be to unite and rise up and say, hey guys, I know you've done a lot of extraction of our minerals, but push back. We will do it for ourselves, and we are going to value add in our own countries, on our own continent. Only then, ladies and gentlemen, will we see value rising from the pathetic 0.5% to something that is significant. If you look at Japan, if you look at Singapore, we're given the example earlier on. Look at South Korea. These guys have got a serious value for their countries, and yet they are fractions of Zimbabwe. I always say this, Israel goes into Zimbabwe 18 times, but their GDP is more than 20 times the GDP of Zimbabwe. How does that happen? How can a desert be better than a country that has got forests, water, and all these things? It's because, again, the issue that Prof. Dela talked about. Do we have that common vision that drives us into the future? So when you look today, I've given the statistics, it's actually very, I mean, I don't see very well. It doesn't settle well with me to see this lopsided aspect of the wealth of the world being controlled by people who actually don't have much in terms of resources. Africa sits with the most resources, and yet we don't have anything to show for it. So all this jostling we are having on the continent, unless we come together with a common vision, driven by, I like this aspect, New Africa, by New Africans. It talks about the mindset. So let me quickly go on to the SVDDM model, and I'll just run it quickly. I developed it out after being frustrated. And I was saying, what model can help? And I'll just run through it quickly. It talks about sustainability at a village development, and I've developed 10 parameters. And these parameters, first of all, it starts with the love of God, followed by the love for people. Very important, because if you don't love people, if you don't love God, you will not get anywhere. But thirdly, after having driven all these things, effective spiritual partnerships. Because we have been told there are a lot of spirit issues on the African continent, and I saw it in my own village. And when you try to develop something, the spiritual world pushes back. I'll give you an example. There was one time I wanted to do a base station on one mountain. I sent my engineers there. They went up the mountain to put a base station so that we could provide communication to the people in that village. And the chief and the headman, they all came together and opposed that move. And we said, why? They said it's a sacred mountain. So fortunately, while that debate was going on, there was another village in Matabeleland who were desperate for communication. So I went there and said, tell you what, while you are discussing about the sacredness of this mountain, I'm pulling the base station out and I'm taking it to Matabeleland. And we did that. The village came up almost in rising. No, we want communication, we want communication. Says, no, but they cannot go up that mountain because they are disturbing our spirits. I said, what spirits? If not only spirits of poverty. By the time the base station went to Matabeleland, they got together and they said to the chief, you remain with your mountain and maybe create your own other mountain. We are going up that mountain and we are going to conquer it. To cut the long story short, on that mountain, the so-called sacred mountain, sits a base station, providing communications to the people of the village, and the village economic activity has increased. So this issue of spiritual partnerships is very important. And then, of course, the traditional and government authority support. We need it. We need to work together because that's the partnership. Then practical village leadership, you have to set up a practical leadership structure that will help you to drive development. I call those enablers. Then on the other side, we have developed what we call the drivers. First of all, village community buy-in. People have to buy into that philosophy. Strategic partnerships. Then you move on to village strategic work plan. In other words, where you actually plan together and then you drive for execution. And it can be done at village level without having to wait for government. And then, of course, continuous review and planning and working. I developed this out of frustration, ladies and gentlemen. And I said, I need a model which can be modified as we go along. And so I took this model and went with it to the village. And my village is Joseph Village, which is in the southern part of Zimbabwe, about 437 kilometers from Harare. And so we started to experiment with this model, the reason being that I'm a villager myself. And the government has said, so I said, thank God, because I'm one of the villagers. So I went back to this village, and we started actually putting a developmental agenda. And we came up with 12 items: education, health, spiritual, food security, housing, power. So we said to the village, we are about 500, guys, These are our developmental sectors, and we are going to appoint people to represent each of the sectors. So we do have a board of directors, which is a board of trustees, 12 people, and each one has got a sector that they represent. And so with that, I represent the transport and communication, of course, because of my trade. And so we have assigned each other those roles in the village. And then what we have seen, to cut the long story short, tremendous impact. So consistent spiritual administration and showcasing of village. All these pictures are from the village, where we are working with one-way ministries from a spiritual perspective, and we showcase the products that are being done by the villagers. There are some ladies in Washington, D.C. right now who constantly phone us for products from Joseph Village. And so we are having that reach and bringing resources to the village. We are turning the village green using land, water, and the sun. People were surprised that you can actually put a 10 horsepower pump in a river and then pump a kilometer or even 1.5 kilometers away from the river and irrigate. This piece of land here is about 800 from the river, 800 meters, and there are sprinklers that are basically irrigating the land this time of the year when it's not raining. It can be done. And so what we are seeing is that when we plan together, we even have a situation where we are creating reservoirs using government expertise and the will by the local people coming together to say, let's do it. We call this one Adonai. It's a small little dam, Adonai. We've put fish in there, and it can provide protein for the village. Tapping the energy from the sun. You know, these panels are becoming cheaper and cheaper. So the sun is a resource from God. We can plant it, and it can drive various machinery, and industry begins to take place. Water storage, we've put water storage tanks in the village working together. Then we've got various crops, of course. Those are fish ponds. One of the farmers in Marondera told me that you guys in Mwenezu, you cry a lot, and you say you are the poorest, but you have got a precious resource, which is the high temperatures. We are in region 5. Why don't you dig fish ponds? We did that. And so now we have got fish ponds in the village, and we are using this as a showcase even for other villagers to come and do that. We have planners from government who come and assist us to say, no, that's not how you do a fish pond. All of a sudden now, we are combining forces and creating viable fishing activities and other economic activities. We have got, again, the southern part of Zimbabwe, lucrative for citrus fruits. And that's my wife actually with one of the mango trees in the village, where you don't need to apply pesticides like what you do in Harare because of the different climatic and environmental factors. And so you find that we can do so much and actually export. But this kind of approach requires tapping into the planning capacity that government has got. So we've opened ourselves to say, government, please come and help us. And that is at the village level. Pen feeding, animals, where instead of getting them to roam around, you put them in a small enclosure and you pen feed them. Once they are ripe for the market, you send them to the market. No longer do we have that concept where you say, I will keep a cow for 15 years as a status symbol. It must be seen as an economic symbol. Once it's ready for the market, let it go. That's the message we are now seeing. Again, we are establishing what we call village nurseries, where we are planting indigenous trees at a household level, putting them together and bringing them to the Forestry Commission, working with the Forestry Commission. That partnership becomes absolutely critical. We are even working with government and traditional authorities to develop village development plans. That's one of the plans. We got a forest which is close to Rinde River, and the idea now is to transform it into a village center with its own shopping malls, schools, and administration centers. And ladies and gentlemen, it's happening from the village. When you activate the village from just being recipients of donor funding and donor help to drivers of self-development, you get incredible things happening. That's one of the machines that we have given to the village to have their own, what we call animal feed. So they basically take all kinds of green stuff, push through that machine, it crushes the stuff. USAID was actually that flag in the background, was coming to assist us in terms of how we can actually mix all that stuff with, I think it's ammonium nitrate or something, to actually create animal food, which is very, very good. All these things are possible when there is that kind of partnership. And then I want to share something. This is an administration block which we have finished at JID. So we constructed this administration block with its own boardroom, with its own offices, and we are now inviting all these NGOs who want to have meetings, seminars. They can have them here for a fee. And that fee goes into a village fund, because we opened an account for the village fund, which is strictly monitored by the board of directors so that it's not abused. And something is happening. And all of a sudden, we are now seeing a hive of activity. We are pumping water from the river into reservoirs. And neighboring communities now, we are saying we want to see the village that has got running water by the end of the period. That is one of the schools, and I'll show you, which we have just completed. And in fact, let me just, I've got a small video here, which I can run quickly. Does it have sound at all? It's okay if it doesn't have sound. If it's a bother, that's fine. But that is one of the schools which we have started as part of the planning that we are pushing for in that village. And you can actually see in the surrounding, it's almost like a misplaced entity. God has given us tremendous land on the African continent. And we need the villagers themselves, because I actually told my fellow villagers here, if we are waiting for central government to come to our village, that road, by the way, was actually done by mobilizing resources within the village. We are doing our own water tanks, and we are putting everything together to drive our own development. And I believe that if it's driven from the grassroots, it has got more impact. Because if we are waiting for it to be driven from the top, many areas will be forgotten. So in other words, we are saying, let us pass the responsibility back to the villagers themselves. Now, there is an incentive that we are actually driving as we are doing this. Because I said to myself and my wife, in fact, my wife always says, what good will it be to build a big house in Borodale in Harare, stay there, then die and perish while the village is in its state? So what we have done is we've gone a step further to say we will now, so we asked the council, the Mwenezi Development Council has actually developed a plan for us. They are now actually scoping this plan for us, because we've said, give us what a little town looks like in the middle of a village, which is no school, no shop, no nothing. We even have got shopping malls that we're actually putting. And we are saying that let's construct those shopping malls under the title of the village, and then people will come and pay rentals going into the village fund, and that fund is going to be used to develop more infrastructure. So at this village, what we have done now is we have said that for us to expand further, we need to foster that public-private partnership that will develop sustainable development. So what are we saying? We are actually giving naming rights. In fact, I sponsored the block, so I gave it my name. Why not? And in fact, what we have said, because it's part of legacy. So what I did was basically to say to guys, if you come and you put a structure in this village, we give you naming rights. So the board, because I'm one of the board members, we sat together. We have seen Manfred Hodgson Hall at the University of Zimbabwe. There's Bait Hall. There is this hall. And I was tired of that. I said, okay, let me start. So it started with my wife, then also volunteered, and she is the one who put the school. So we call it the Dr Mboweni Learning Center, SMLC. So when that now is happening, we are now inviting partners who are saying, look, I also want a block which I will name after myself. I said, please, with pleasure. So in other words, we can then develop the village using that principle and philosophy which the board has taken through to the village. And I believe this for me is more significant than my house in Mandara, let me tell you. Because this will be there long after I'm gone. So this is now about actually building legacy. Now, I want to share with you this particular individual. It's a skill that is found in the village. I want you to note, again, the sound is not connected, but you will see what it is here. This is developing water resources on the dry riverbeds. Runde River right now is dry. What this guy, amazingly, he used to work in South Africa, so he says he can construct, if you look at that cylinder there, he can construct a cylinder by brick and cement to about 3 meters or even 4 meters high on the riverbed. Then he goes inside and begins to scoop the sand. And this structure begins to sink. By the time he gets to where the water is, he goes even further to remove the sand, and now you have got a protected water well, which you can seal. Now, I had never come across that. And this was a skill in the village. So we invited him, and this is and this is what he did for us. Basically, he developed this whole concept of, it's a small video which I wanted to say, but to play, but anyway. Are you able to play from my machine, please? Just scroll down, and if you scroll down, you will see the, no. Just go to the particular, right? If you go down that page, that slide, with your mouse. Can you scroll down with the mouse? Right? Then click the play there. I want you to see, yeah, just click the play. I want you to see so what this guy does, and he has got serious, some incredible breathing skills. We even said, no, we need to find something safe for him. Because he goes into the water, disappears. He will be scooping the sand underneath that structure, comes out, and then hands over the sand that he has scooped to the guys outside, and then they throw the sand. In the meantime, this structure is actually sinking slowly onto the riverbed. And you have secured your water. And so I found this absolutely incredible. So what I then came back to Harare, and I challenged some of my colleagues. I said, look, can we not come up actually with a mask, which he can have, with a pipe for breathing, so that he can actually work underneath that water body easily. And so innovation is actually coming out of just observing some of the practices that are happening in the village. But let me move on for the sake of our time. So demonstrating that public-private sector cooperation at Richile School, for example, that we have had. The public sector, in this case, what do? Provide approvals, curriculum development, staff provision, training, infrastructure, monitoring. The local community, the citizens, local leadership, land acquisition, funding and resources, community engagements, ongoing volunteer work. As I speak right now, there are teams that are actually working on that land, and they are pushing for that development of the land. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, let me say this. This PPP really works, and particularly when you drive it from the base, from the roots, nothing is impossible. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.